All right, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Spark AI Show. We're in the middle of sort of transitioning and transforming the podcast, and so we're going to look a little different today than maybe you expect if you're a regular listener. So we're going to be moving forward. We're going to be doing more interview style. So we're going to be bringing on some of the folks within the industry who are involved in AI and technology across the space. And so today I've actually got Roman Kepczyk with me. Roman is the director of firm technology strategy with Rightworks, and we're excited to have him on board today. So Roman, hey, how's it going?
Doing awesome, TJ. Thank you very much for having me on board.
Absolutely. So Roman, I know you've been involved in a lot of events lately, and that's really what I want to talk to you about, because I know that sort of the summer event season is a really good time to get exposed to a lot of the sort of what's going on in accounting. Before we jump in, though, maybe just a quick introduction. Tell me a little bit more about sort of what's your day-to-day look like.
Sure. Pretty much as director of firm technology strategy, my role is being an outsourced IT partner to accounting firms, ranging anywhere from 20 members up to 2,000. I've actually worked with about 30 of the top 100, basically going in and really looking at their adoption of technology, looking at the workflows that they've implemented for tax and audit production. And now we're doing a lot of work on CAS, believe it or not, which has a lot of AI built into it as well.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, speaking of AI, I know that you had a chance to attend several events over the last several weeks, and I know you're involved with firm consulting and things like that. So you're really well exposed to sort of what's going on in the world of accounting technology. And I would love to, I know I heard that you were at Engage. I know you were at CPAFMA a week or two ago. Maybe just a quick high level overview of some of the events that you've attended recently. And I guess the poke into that is just sort of how much is AI taking over the agenda at those events?
Well, it's funny, like we were at BDO, the Midwest Conference yesterday in Indianapolis, and on all three of the programs you mentioned, pretty much AI is by far the number one topic, different variations on how different departments utilize the tool, what is practical, what is hype out there. There's a lot of speakers that are coming from the outside who have expertise in specific components of it. But overall, we're all in the same place, just trying to figure out what is the practical tools that are happening and using it for AI.
Yeah. So you mentioned that sort of practical versus hype, and I would love to, maybe just take a minute, just real talk for a moment, right? So what are we seeing in terms of real practical? We had this conversation just internally yesterday with our team. Somebody was asking us, like, what are we seeing in terms of real, like, adoption with some of these tools? Are there products out there who are actually generating revenue on this, or are we still just seeing, is it still a lot of in the investment and exploring the capabilities and really still trying to find where the capabilities meet up with the problem point? So I guess, give me a little insight into sort of how you're seeing that hype versus practical application right now.
Well, what I see from the big guys, the major players like Thomson Reuters, CCH, Intuit, is they're bolting on applications. They're in the phase of trying to roll out something and talk about it, but they're really, I haven't seen great delivery beyond the things that we talked about in the past, which is like improved research tools, for tax. It's really kind of limited at this point. Where we've seen the more interesting innovations is from the standalone products like iWin, Blackor, the development of the companies like, I'll say, BotKeeper, who are adding components into it, Canopy or Carbon, they're adding specific components to make it easy to use. I'll say the generative AI solutions like ChatGPT to basically generate emails and things like that. But it's not, like I said, it's not major changes in time savings is what we're seeing for those. Okay. It's a streamlining, and it will happen. It'll get much more effective in the long term. But for right now, it's early rollouts. Where we are seeing some really interesting discussions is like, I mentioned iWin, and it's spelled weird, AIWIN.
Right.
We've seen some firms say that they've used that to automate their payables process or different components of that. And they've seen significant savings because it's, like I said, saving a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I expect to see, similar tools to that being adopted by the big guys and then rolled out probably in the fall conference season.
Yeah. So it sounds like, that's kind of the feedback that I gave to our team is I'm seeing a lot more of the, I was at Firm Growth Forum out in San Diego a few weeks back, and I saw a number of new companies that I hadn't heard of before, in the AI space. And there really is sort of this difference between, so I'm here representing Spark, and we're sort of a broad-based tool, very much a chat GPT, but sort of more built for the accounting firm. So you've got the broad-based tools that allow you to access AI, generative AI, sort of broadly. And then you've got, some of the things you were just mentioning are more leveraging Gen AI and machine learning to solve for a very specific problem, right? Whether it's practice management or whether it's tax prep or those kinds of things with iWin and Blackor. Tell me what you're seeing in the space as it relates to the difference between sort of that broad base versus the point solution.
Okay. Well, when you talk about the broad-based, chat GPT, we see like BDO Digital having a chat GPT version that they provide to the BDO firms, but not for the alliance firms. And so what we think is going to happen is on the GPT side is there will be a development of private GPTs, which when you think about Spark, it really is a private GPT. We've created it internally. We allow people to use it, and it's a safe place to go in and play with the system, understand how to use it, to learn to memorize prompts. I mean, that's one of the big discussions we have at every group is how do I have useful prompts that are repeatable and all that? And that's what I see like the private GPTs, such as, like I said, our Spark doing that. I anticipate firms will develop their own private GPTs eventually for their specific niches. You'll recall at our Right Now conference, Radhika Dirks talked about, 80% of what we CPAs do is obsolete now. The other 20%, the unique thing is what we got to figure out. Well, firms have niches, whether it's auto dealerships, whether it's restaurants, whether it's medical profession. And if they can take their captured knowledge, basically their intellectual capital that they've developed, their spreadsheets, their questionnaires and all that, build it into a private GPT like Spark, then they can query that in a very safe environment and they can build on it and actually rely on the results. So we see that on the GPT side. I think the part that kind of gets unnoticed is the components that are the early components, such as robotic process automation, machine learning, what we call, augmented intelligence types tools. And I see these generative AI tools making those much more effective. And so we're in, like I said, some firms, it's a little bit complex to use those tools, and we have to develop specific experts. Think about like Power BI. It's a hard program to learn. Once you learn it, it's great, takes special skill. But I think the generative AI tools will allow us to query and make requests in those, everything from Power BI to Excel, which we're all experts at, to Teams especially, and actually get great value out of it on the other end.
Yeah. When you talk about Power BI, I think one of the benefits we're seeing even now, we talk a lot about crawl, walk, run, right? So there's this idea of like the crawl is, maybe right now we're not connected into Power BI, but you can leverage the power of the models to even just ask it like, I'm trying to do this in Power BI. How can I think about this? And it can really help you frame the problem and then walk you through the solution. How do you build out the dashboard or the whatever? So another theme that we have is expanding your expertise. So I am not a Power BI expert, but I can actually do a lot more in those tools than I ever thought possible because I just take it to Spark and I say, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Help me, walk me through the steps to build this out in a way that makes sense, and it just walks you through the process,
And what's cool is you can capture that and give it to other team members. So now they know how to do it because they've got a live example and they have a place to put in their query into it, using your structure that you just taught them on.
That's
and
right.
It works the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
So the other thing that I think is really cool that we see, when you said practical, the first thing that came to mind is the transcription components of it. Most of us use Teams and Zoom, but what's really great is you have tools like Otter AI, Fireflies. Teams does have a product that does transcription, but it's not as concise. We use Clary Copilot at Rightworks. And the quality is amazing on how it can summarize a meeting, how it can give you the action steps at the very end, even can help you catch up and do assignments for those projects.
Yeah. Yeah. Those tools are making a lot of progress. I was actually in a webinar yesterday with and it was the VP product, I think, from Otter, and it just interesting hearing their take on things. And, they were very candid about some of the limitations that still exist within not only their product, but just the capabilities of, the things that they have their eyes on and things they want to do, but that are just limited by the models that are available and those kinds of things. So I think that's the other thing to understand is we are continuing to progress rapidly, but we're progressing. There's still things that are limitations. And you mentioned sort of the difference between Teams and what it's capable of versus, some of these other point solutions that were built explicitly to help you with your call recordings and your transcripts.
Yeah, and you have to realize all this, we're not even really in 2 years yet. Right, it's about 19 months. And you think about the amazing progress that's happened, that virtually everyone's heard of it. Most people have used it. Granted, accountants were a little bit behind the curve. We have more of a wait and see kind of attitude. We actually saw that. We did a survey through a group called CPAFMA, the Firm Management Association. And in December, there were still almost 2/3 of the members that were on the wait and see. Only 8% were really excited about what's happening. Yeah. Yesterday at BDO, we asked the question out there, like, how many of you are excited about this and have a policy? And it was actually less than what the CPAFMA survey showed.
Oh, wow.
Only like 1 out of 5 firms had already created guidelines and, started training their employees to make awareness of it. And that's one of the keys where I think we have to make sure all the partners who are listening is this is moving so quickly today that if you don't at least recognize it and try to discuss it, that you're going to be far behind. It's going to be too hard to catch up.
Yeah.
So we're really promoting firms that make it part of every part of your strategy. It's not just technology. It's tax process, it's assurance process, it's CAS. Every application, every tool, every industry, all your clients are being impacted by different AI solutions.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about just the usage within firms. And one of the things, so we actually covered on one of our more recent episodes, the work trends report that Microsoft and LinkedIn came out with. And one of the things, if it holds true across industries, right? I don't remember how many, it was 30,000 businesses or something like that. I don't know. It was a lot of businesses. And they did this study basically analyzing a number of things. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting was the usage of AI within companies. And they said essentially, the stat that stuck out to me was 75% of people are using AI within their work life, within their, they're using it. So when you say 1 out of 5 are saying, there are people in that firm who are using AI to do work, right? That they aren't being vocal about it, right? And so of those 75% that are using it, they said, I think it was off top of my head here, I think it was 75% of them are bringing their own tools, right? So it's sort of a bring your own AI tool, use it at work. It's not sanctioned. And so one of the things that, we're saying, and it sounds like mirrors what you're saying is, put an AI policy into place. Even if it's just a bare bones, like, the first shot out of the gate is just to be able to empower your employees to use it safely, right? It's use this tool and don't put this kind of data in there. Even if that's all you do to start with, like that's a good start, and then refine that and make it better and more robust. But give your employees something that they can rely on that feels good and that everybody feels good about within the firm.
Yeah, and remember, we went through the same kind of phases when PCs first came out, when internet and social media came out, as far as having social media policies and all that. This is the next generation. And I think you hit the nail on the head, is setting guidelines as to what is acceptable use, what is acceptable use with permission, without permission, so that people just understand it, they can comfortably do it. The reality is like you pointed out, they're bringing it with them either on their tablets or their smartphones. AI is just available there. Yeah. And it is a time saver. And the more comfortable you get with it and learn how to use it within those guidelines, the more effective your firm will be at adopting the solutions.
Yeah. And the more broadly you roll it out, the more you're going to get those people who just really want to dig in and find the solutions to the problems. And they're going to be able to use AI to do that. And so,
and we actually look for those people in the departments, in our discussion yesterday, like, how do you make AI as part of your strategy and keep it moving forward? And so one of the discussions is identifying the person you just talked about, the people that are excited about, love it, and actually give them hours. They might be a tax person, they might be an assurance person, they could be in administration, but give them hours where the responsibility is to research solutions, not only in the firm's applications, but also industry applications outside of that, and then educate the rest of us. Like I said, this is moving so quickly out there that if you don't know the basics, it's going to be real hard to catch up when it all hits.
Yeah, that's such a key point, right? Educate the rest of us. Because I think if they're going off and finding great solutions, but they're not sharing it, then, it's just, you're limiting the impact. So,
yeah. And you can do like a monthly town hall, and it could be like a lunch and learn or 30 minutes just to discuss baseline understanding, the different tools out there, narrow it down to 2 or 3 to make it easy for people, and give them a little bit of training education with those guidelines that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Roman, back to just some of the event stuff that you may have witnessed. I'm curious, are there any themes, maybe new themes that we are just now starting to see emerge that you saw in any of the sessions that you attended?
Well, I think the 2 big themes that we talked about was, one, the private GPTs. That's one thing, and then the expectations of Microsoft Copilot. So when we talk about our unique skills, the private GPTs is going to be a place where we dump in all of our niche knowledge, whatever our specialty is, and that becomes our unique, intellectual capital that we can use on every application, every client that's out there. So I think you're going to see a lot of advancements on that. People are asking, like, how do you do that? Do we use Microsoft Azure? Do we, how do we train our people on it?
Yeah.
The other component that I probably had the most questions on was Copilot, and what we see, and the consensus of the speakers I saw at a lot of the conferences was that we will transition away from Outlook towards Teams, and Teams will connect to SharePoint and OneDrive as the database in there, and that will become the searchable component of Copilot. So in industry, and Microsoft has weird names, like they call Microsoft Fabric, Copilot for Fabric is for financial data. So for instance, if you have accounting systems, you have financial statements, you have reports that come out of Power BI and all that, those will be all searchable through Copilot and basically centralized through Teams is the way I'm kind of understanding it.
Yeah.
So I'd say those are the 2 big things that I looked at or heard the most about. And it was pretty consistent between all 3 conferences.
Okay. Are you getting a sense for timing with the Copilot in terms of like when it's going to be really ready?
What I think what'll happen is components of Copilot, is available to the large firms now, and you can buy a single-use license. But I think it'll probably be after October 15th of this year, or probably most likely after April 15th next year, when firms really dive in. And so what I anticipate is next summer in the June timeframe, when we have conferences start up again, we will see some very specific applications being taught to us in Copilot for analyzing financial data, both from a meeting perspective like Teams, as well as a financial perspective through Excel and Power BI and Power Automate, those, API tools. Because, when you talk about what Microsoft Graph, that's the name of theirs. It's actually an API, just like the APIs you have with QuickBooks and all these things that will go into all those places and pull that data. But I think we need some direction, and Microsoft needs to mature it. They usually get it right by the 3rd version. I was a Lotus 1-2-3 guy, a WordPerfect guy, and now none of us will ever leave, the accounting profession will ever leave Microsoft.
Yeah.
So I think that we'll start to see some baseline implementation that I'll say is consumer grade for all of us, the great and washed, to be able to use inside of our firms and not have to. Well, initially we'll rely on our experts, those champions inside the firm, but long term it'll become as commonplace as us using Excel or Word or Outlook.
Yeah. That's great. So we've talked about some interesting use cases. You mentioned how we're using Clary AI within the company for transcripts and analyzing that kind of stuff. Are you seeing any other? So we're still seeing a lot of people using it. Sort of a baseline use case are still around writing and research, right? So those are 2 main use cases. Help me get a little further faster with my research, or help me respond to this email, or write a response to an IRS notice. And the truth is, like, those are still really valuable use cases. And I think a lot of folks are still seeing that there's plenty of return on investment for spending the time to learn how to do those use cases. I am curious if you're hearing other, like, what's that next order? If those are the sort of 101 level, what's the 201 level use cases that people are really starting to adopt at this point?
Well, I think it's the starting of the financial analysis component, that once you understand like the top 6 financial metrics, and learning to apply that to data. That's where we're seeing the regional firms actually apply this stuff and actually give ratios. And that's the beginning of building dashboards like the Power BI and all that. And so I think for it to be valuable to us as the accounting profession, we've got to have stuff that gives us insight very quickly. And I think it's happening in the finance area. The finance people are probably 6 months ahead of us, and corporate finance as well.
Okay.
And so they're generating these examples, real worlds, and we're starting. The middle-sized firms and large firms have heard of it, and they're starting to do it. So that's something that's actually valuable because we've struggled with developing dashboards and maintaining dashboards for our CAS clients.
Yeah.
And so we need something that's a little bit more seamless. And I think that's going to be kind of the next phase, and easier use of APIs. The linking between our payroll products and our accounting products, with our inventory products and our accounting products. One of the co-pilots actually is Copilot for GitHub, which is a bunch of programming languages and all that. And so I think that's the phase that's happening. In the fall, we could expect to start hearing some speeches about that and examples and topics. So, yeah. And the third part of it, I forgot to mention this earlier, but there's a lot of questions about, help me understand the privacy rules about this. What is the regulations that are happening? And I think that is a great unknown. We get a lot of questions with no answers.
Yeah.
So in the fall, we expect to hear a lot about actual legislation that goes through or regulations that are created, not only in Europe with the GDPR and the US and California, but there's a lot of questions about, okay, we have these basic guidelines, but how do we lock them down so it's safe and we don't get sued for doing this?
Right.
Yep.
So you mentioned, we had a brief conversation just about adoption a minute ago, and you mentioned sort of the 1 out of 5. Are you seeing any trends as it relates to adoption? And really what I'm looking for is what are the barriers to adoption? Is it more just laggards, sort of in general? Is it more like, are there technical, or is it the data privacy? What are some of the barriers that we're seeing to adoption of AI tools?
I think it's one of those things like where accountants always want to wait and see. And like we said, the majority of the people are still wait and see until someone does something with it.
Yeah.
And what happens is those cases are being exposed like right now at all these conferences. But we need to get, you might have 1 or 2 leaders in the firm at these conferences. They need to get all the people back in the office on board as well. So I think education is the biggest barrier. It's how do we let all the decision makers know that there is value in it? We assume everyone knows it's happening. You and I are involved where we see it at every technology, every application, basically every strategy discussion. It's in there. But our accounting firms, that the people that are doing the taxes and the audits, they don't discuss these things at all. They're just got their heads down, buried, and doing the work.
Right.
And so we need to find an effective way to spread the message inside of our organizations to say it's going to be part of what we do moving forward, whether we like it or not. And that's why you hear so many headlines that say, you won't be replaced by AI, you'll be replaced by someone using AI.
Right.
And it's never been more true.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be the driver when we start seeing firms adopt it and educate all their users.
Yeah. So I guess my follow-up question was going to be, what do you see as the solution to this? But it really feels like that is the answer. Is we got to just get it in the hands of the people, make sure they feel safe, make sure everybody in the firm feels good about it, and that we feel safe about using it.
And again, having those town halls or lunch and learns where you expose to people what it actually does and how it can actually solve a firm problem internally.
Right. This may lead us down a rabbit hole, but and maybe this is fodder for another episode entirely. But as we see, just nuggets of some of the efficiencies that we're gaining from this, how do you think this impacts how we track work and bill for work and things like that? I know we've got value-based billing, but there's still a number of firms that are operating off of billable hours and things like that. Do you think we're going to see a forced sort of fundamental shift in how we bill for work?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you do it hours and you're saving hours, you're basically giving it away.
Right.
And so I think the industry's done a good job of trying to transition us to a more advisory in nature. That if you're just doing a 1040 for a client, you should be scuttling those clients. the reality is that takes a lot of effort, and it messes up your staffing during peak seasons. So if you can't expand it to do projections or business advisory services, you're going to basically work yourself to death and your staff to death, and you're not going to have any staff. And so as we look more advisory in nature, the discussion goes to having more of a fixed fee or monthly type arrangement that's in there. And, this is a cost for all of our services in there. If you don't do that, what's going to end up happening is, like you said, you'll atrophy the clients and end up with the clients that, are high maintenance, low satisfaction. Some of them are great margin, but in 1 year, but then they're a pain the next, that kind of thing. And so it's not a sustainable practice. And I think we've had lots and lots of discussions about that in our, the reality is every firm is struggling for staffing. Every firm is using technology to streamline production. Every firm is looking at using non-accounting professionals. They're looking at offshoring or onshoring, those kind of things. We're all doing everything, and yet we have more work than we can handle.
Yeah.
What's interesting is we've actually had a reduction in the discussion about marketing because firms have more work than they can handle. And if you would focus on the advisory component, you actually get more great work than you can handle, and you schedule less. And so I think there's a transition to becoming more of a specialist firm where you bill for the overall value given as opposed to the hours.
Yeah.
And again, there's a lot of great speakers out there who've been talking about that. And I think people will understand that once they start doing the work and doing fixed fee agreements.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, as we come towards a wrap up, I just have one final question here. And what I would love to hear from you, Roman, is just, as you've been attending sessions and you're meeting with folks, what is it that's getting you the most excited around the developments with AI? Maybe, project out 6+ months or so. What do you see sort of on that horizon that's really exciting? You think we might actually start to see come tax season next year?
Well, I think the mindset, we're going to start shifting away from this being this weird thing in a black box to being, what I try to tell people is it's going to become your virtual assistant. It's going to be like, when you had an intern that did stuff, you had to train them up front to learn things. Then you had to correct them when they made mistakes. And then they took over components for you. And what I'm excited about is we can start seeing it actually take over some of the rote, easy stuff that we do and sometimes enjoy doing it, honestly. But what we do, we can pass it on. And I think by not, like I said, when we look at tax season 2025, we're going to see some automation tools that do as well in the scanning, organizing, and preparation phase as our interns. And so our interns will verify their work and all that. And so actually one of the speakers at the conferences I attended basically said that 2025 will be the last normal tax season we ever experience in our lifetimes, because the AI tools will evolve so much that it just does a lot of the basic stuff very easily. And there's proof of concept of that happening. So when I look at being excited, I think next year we'll all be exposed to this cool stuff, but then the following year we'll actually be using it, and it'll be saving time and actually change the workflows and the way we do not only tax returns, but even audits and analyzing clients' financial data.
Yeah. It's exciting to think about. It'll be interesting to see if it comes to fruition. I think that's I think everybody's been teasing that for years and years. There's going to be a change. We're going to make a difference. But I do think that there is some paradigm shifting technology out there that is going to allow for some of this stuff to actually.
Well, and I think this is happening faster than anybody expects it. It has already happened. If you think about what Microsoft did from buying it in January, putting in $10 billion in January of last year, and then putting $100 billion in this March for that. It's happening faster than any of us ever expected to happen.
Absolutely. Well, Roman, thanks so much for joining us today. Always good to hear from you. Always good to chat with you. So appreciate that. For our listeners out there, feel free to give us a rating, review, and certainly we're on YouTube, so feel free to leave comments in the threads there, and we'd love to hear what you want to hear about. So thanks so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.